Okay. Won't yell. Making some changes on the fly here. So as we come into this place to worship this morning, I am welcoming you into a service of participation. And I promise that's maybe not as scary as it sounds right now. During our worship service this morning, we'll be participating in what we have come to know as a question box sermon. So if you have a wondering or a question that you think could benefit the group, you have some pieces of paper in your order of service. If you need a pen, please raise your hand and our ushers will come around to you. But as we're going through the service this morning, I invite you to think of a question, and it could be something about Unitarian Universalism that you're not sure about, something about history, something about theology, something about spiritual practices, things like that. And during the time of our offertory, those will actually be collected by the ushers. We're going to bring them up, and that's going to be the sermon. And I will say, this is not something, I've done this 2 times before. This is not something I would usually do, but I think it's really important that we know that we can ask thoughtful questions. This is an opportunity to have fun. It's not going to be too serious, so I invite you to bring a sense of wonder, a sense of openness, a sense of joy. So we'll deepen into the spirit of worship together with these words. Come, bring your weary heart into this place. Bring your doubts, your insecurities, your uncertainties. Try, if you can, to open yourself to the silence, to the music, to a sense of wonder that may be trying to make its way to the surface of your being. Come into this place and breathe. Breathe in and out. Let your body relax into your chair if it will, knowing that this is a place where you can let yourself unwind. Come into this place and know that you are among friends and friendly strangers, that you are welcome and that your presence is valued. Come into this place and understand that you are not alone. We need one another. So in this spirit, let us worship together.
For the wonder and inspiration we seek from sun and stars and all the lights of the heavens, we light this chalice. And now, please join me in saying our affirmation, printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. And now please join us in singing Come, Come, Whoever You Are, hymn number 188 in the gray hymnal.
Be led by Rusty, and then this section in the middle here will be led by Eileen, and then you'll be with me. Okay, we'll sing it all through one time together, and then we'll do it twice more in a round. Okay. 188.
Saj, I think, going first.
Yeah, different hymn. 188. Come, come, whoever you are. Ready? And come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, come, whoever you are,
Come, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Thank you.
So I just want to remind you to go ahead and start working on those questions. It's going to come up really fast, and we need them to make the sermon. So while you're listening to Lauren, think of a question.
And good morning. My name's Lauren Daniel. I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Education. Before I ask the young and the young at heart to come forward before me on the steps, I want to invite you that if you brought any shelf-stable items for our charity partner, MetroCrest Services, that you give them to a young person on their way up here. And so if you are young and young at heart, I invite you to come to the front here for a story about somebody named Mariah Mitchell. So as you take your seats, I want to ask you a question. Do you like asking questions? Do you ask the adults in your family lots of questions? Oh, you ask your brother questions. Okay, yes. Yes, I have 4 siblings. I know what that's like. Yep. So anyway, I want to tell you a story about somebody named Mariah Mitchell, who was a Unitarian. And she was also an astronomer, and she loved to ask questions. But first of all, can somebody tell me what an astronomer is? What is? Somebody that studies outer space. Yes, exactly. So I just wanted to make sure we were. Yeah, well, yes, they do lots of things. I mean, and there's lots of different kinds of astronomers, like astrophysicists and things like that, but let's just say astronomers. So let me tell you a story, and I hope she'll appear behind me, first of all, I want you to imagine a young girl from about 200 years ago. Her name was Mariah Mitchell, and she was a Unitarian. And so when Mariah was young, she loved to ask lots and lots of questions. When she would ask, what? What is that? How? And then when she was 3, she would ask, how? How does that work? And then when she was 4, she would ask, why? Like, why does it get dark at night? Why are there stars? And so her parents tried their best to answer her questions, and no matter how many she asked, which is wonderful because, you know, kids ask lots of questions. But Mariah always kept having questions. And then when she got a little older, she would ask questions at her Quaker church. And she asked questions of everyone she met. Hundreds of questions, thousands of questions, an infinity of questions, just from this one little girl. And her family and she lived in Nantucket, Massachusetts. And as you know, Nantucket kind of sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean. And they were able to go onto the roof of their house, and she could see all the ocean at night. And as you can imagine, 200 years ago, there weren't like city lights, and so she could see all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So from atop her house, she could see to the stars, she could see the ocean. She would think to herself, I love the stars. And she would say to her father, as they would look through a telescope and see farther into the sky, she would ask him lots and lots of questions. And she would ask questions like, where do the stars come from? What are they made of? Why do they twinkle? Why do they shine? How many are there? As you can imagine, she had lots. How far away are they? And sometimes her father could answer the questions, and sometimes he could not. And so with his support, she started to find out the questions, to answer the questions for herself. And finally, she decided, I want to be an astronomer and study the stars. And the problem was, though, in those days, women did not go to college, and they for sure were not astronomers. But the father knew that there were no women astronomers at that time, and so he supported her. And he said he would teach her all he knew, but that if she studied hard if that she believed in herself, she could become an astronomer. And she did do that. She did study hard, she read many books, she did many experiments, and she did become an astronomer. And then when she was 29, she discovered a comet, and it's called Mitchell's Comet, and she won an award from the King of Denmark for finding it. And little by little, she became very famous. And in 1848, she became the first woman member of the Academy of Sciences and Arts here in America. But you know, she asked more questions than just about science. She asked questions of her Quaker friends because she was part of a Quaker church at that time. How do we know God exists? When we read the Bible, what do we know is true about the Bible? Well, why are we here as human beings? Well, some people told her, well, yeah, it's written in the Bible, so therefore it is. And then some of them were like, stop asking questions. It's in the Bible. So Maria knew that the answers of these questions could not be found easily, and she kept asking anyway. And then one day, Mariah heard a talk by Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing. And Channing said, you didn't have to have all the answers. It's okay just to wonder. And Mariah joined the Unitarian Church because it felt like she's quoted by saying it woke up her mind, because she had heard that there was room for an infinity of answers to an infinity of questions. And so for the rest of her life, Mariah asked what, how, and why. She became a teacher, and then she became a professor at Vassar College, the first women's college, and taught other people about astronomy. And she mentored other women and went on to be active in like the women's suffrage movement. It was really amazing. But she always asked questions. She kept experimenting. She encouraged everyone to think for themselves. Sometimes those people found the answers, and sometimes they didn't. But Mariah was happy for her students because the most important thing was to wonder and not have all the answers. And so I love this story, and I love this story about our Unitarian Universalist forebear, because curiosity and asking questions are a big part of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. In Unitarian Universalism, we are not given all the answers. We're not told what to believe. And so we need to ask questions and to wonder and chart our own spiritual paths and keep exploring. So thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to ask Marty to stand up in the back and take you to class. We are still on our summer curriculum, and up to 12-year-olds can go to class with Marty and Joe. So let's go ahead and sing the kids out and keep wondering and asking questions.
We come now to the time in our worship service where we share our gifts with one another. We know there's lots of ways to give, whether you give to Horizon with your time, with your talents, and we know that lots of folks choose to give online. So we'll share our gifts with one another now, and also please share your questions. The offering will now be generously given and received.
is the question by Erica Hewitt. It begins with a quotation from Carl Sagan. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great, enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. I'm sorry, I'm so accustomed to this being on. Reverend Hewitt goes on to say, when I find myself wondering how much I believe in us, sometimes I drop that question into the same well of deep time. Did you know, for example, that for every grain of sand on Earth, there are 100 Earth-like planets in the known universe? Even our small, backwater Milky Way galaxy should be teeming with intelligent life. Where is everyone? This is a question that astrophysicists have tried to answer for decades, and that's where science becomes my primary spiritual text. Some experts believe that we are all alone in the universe because almost no planet can get past the long series of rare biological and chemical occurrences necessary for life. We did. Our astonishing planet had to clear a series of challenging hurdles to get us here. This is called the rare earth hypothesis. If there's a great filter that prevents almost all intelligent life from forming advanced civilizations, it seems like our planet made it through. We're special, right? Could be. But other scientists believe that many civilizations have already risen up and fallen away, or even self-destructed. In that case, if we are here alone, the great filter wouldn't be behind us, it's ahead of us. That would mean that for all the miracles our planet has pulled off, an even more threatening and cataclysmic filter lies ahead. If we fail to survive that great filter, life won't exist anywhere in the universe. So, are we special or are we doomed? Your answer, and mine, reveals how much you believe in our capacity to heal ourselves, to save ourselves and our blue-green home. For me, resignation about the futility of escape or rescue isn't an option. Embracing my faith in us is the choice that empowers me. I can wake up on any given morning ready to keep fighting for our human family. May we, stardust, become sentient, passengers and companions through the darkest drift of space. Never give up on one another and all that we are capable of.
We come now to the time in our service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. We'll have a time of shared silence. We'll hear the joys and sorrows of our community together. We'll have a spoken prayer, and then we'll join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. So I invite you to join me now in some shared silence. We have both joys and sorrows to share this morning. We begin with a sorrow or concern for Pam Schumann as she's not feeling well. Our thoughts are with her. This morning we also have a lot of joy to share, joy to play with Horizon players and bring life to their production of the Centerville Ghost. We also celebrate with Laura and Jeff Wooten 27 years of marriage and joy that their daughter is home before starting her sophomore year. Congratulations. Let us breathe together. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayer. We give thanks this morning for the sunrise, that first morning light, a reminder that new beginnings are all around us, always. A reminder that it is never too late to try again, to apologize, to start something new. May our souls be like that sunrise, ever open to what tomorrow may bring. Spirit, we gather in gratitude, too, for the chance to be together, to take time for one another, to care for ourselves and each other, for the privilege of being in each other's lives. Help us remember that this is what matters. We acknowledge, too, all who are suffering in the world, the hungry, the incarcerated, all those whose lives are hard because of injustice, because of systems that have for too long benefited some at the expense of many. We hold them in our hearts. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be loved. May they feel comfort, and may we feel comfort. Help us to let go of things that are not ours to hold, to realize that control is but an illusion, to move into that painful, vulnerable space of uncertainty and openness to the future. And for all those things left unsaid, known only in the silence of our hearts, we pray today and every day. Amen. I invite us now to remain seated and join in singing our responsive hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life.
like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then, gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer.
Okay, folks, so as we begin our time together this morning, I think it's important to emphasize the reasons for doing a question box sermon. So this is something that's a little bit old school, you might say, in Unitarian Universalism, a tradition that's been around for a while, and some of you who've been around longer than I have may be able to speak to that. But I've done this a couple times before. This will be a one and only time at Horizon for me. And I will say, being on the spot and extemporaneous preaching is not my style, but I think that this is important. It can be fun for a few reasons. And I want to emphasize that I think, you know, there are folks who may have grown up in faith traditions where when you got to a certain age and you started to ask questions, which is, by the way, normal and a healthy part of our faith development and human development, it may not have been received well. You know, you may have wondered things like, why are we here? What do we believe? And you may have been told that it's bad to ask questions, or that meant that you didn't believe the right way, or that you weren't the right kind of whatever religion you may have grown up as. You know, do you know what I'm saying? I think that maybe a lot of people have felt that way. And so I just want to kind of emphasize that here, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not have the answers. We're not going to have them. There's a lot of things that we're never going to understand. But we're grateful for our sense of wonder, for the ability to ask, and for people to wonder about these questions with. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we get going. So there have been a lot of questions in here, I would say, about prayer, which is interesting to me. What does prayer do? How is prayer a spiritual practice? How can you use prayer, maybe if you don't believe in God? So I'm going to try to wrap those into one. So, and usually the question also is, does prayer work? And my answer, I think, is prayer works if you think it works. You know, in my hospital chaplaincy time, I got that question a lot. Well, why should we pray? Does it do anything? You know, if you don't believe in God, who are you praying to? If you don't pray in Jesus' name, is it valid? Is it real? You know, I think that prayer is not necessarily for any higher power. I think prayer is for the person saying the prayer. Is there something that you need to say, that you need to get off of your chest? Is there something that you want to communicate to something out there that you don't even know if it exists? You know, is there something so deep within you that you don't even feel like you can say to another person out loud? Do you need to write it? Is it in your head? Do you feel it in your body? I think prayer gives us a chance, and by the way, there's a lot of different kinds of prayers. We've experimented with some. I think a song can be a prayer, the way you move your body can be a prayer. But prayer gives us a chance to acknowledge what we're feeling, to try to communicate it, even to our own selves. We may never have actually sat down and taken that chance before. Prayer can also be a time to be quiet. Prayer and meditation, I think, are kind of linked that way. Obviously, there's differences, but it can be a time to sit still. Prayer can be just paying attention, just noticing what might come to you. There's all different ways that we might define it. So I think if you don't believe in God, I think that's a way that prayer might be meaningful to you. And if we're talking about prayer as a spiritual practice, I think that opportunity each morning to maybe sit in silence, to notice what comes up for you, to notice if there's things you feel like are unsaid within you, if there's things that you need to say, I think that's the way that prayer can be a spiritual practice. And one person noticed that it seems really hard to do, and I would say, yes, it is. Okay, so our next question is, what is your elevator speech for explaining Unitarian Universalism? So throughout my life, especially being the child of a UU minister, I've had a lot of people ask, what is that? What does that mean? I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. Can you tell me more about that? This happens to me at least once a week. That does not mean that my elevator speech is perfect, but this is usually what I say. So we'll talk more, I think, about this historical figure, but Francis David said, "We need not think alike to love alike." And some of you have probably heard that before. I think that's a really important way to begin. So we believe, we, meaning Unitarian Universalists, believe that how we are together, our covenant, how we choose to interact with one another is more important than believing the same thing. So I try to emphasize that, and they say, okay, but how does that work? And the truth is that it's messy. It's always messy, right? I think that our principles, 7 and an 8th kind of in conversation, they hold us to the way we want to treat each other with inherent worth and dignity, with respect for the interconnected web. And the truth is that in everyone's lived experience, that may look different. In every congregation, it's going to be different. But Unitarian Universalism is important to me because I think that we need a place where it's okay to be who you are. You don't have to all believe the same thing, but you choose to believe in community. You choose to believe in there's a group of people that wants to interact with each other with love and respect, and you choose to keep showing up. So that's my elevator speech, and I hope all of you may be working on yours. Our next question, this is a tough question, is what is the root of all evil? Just a little light topic here. Of course, I think the key to so many of these is being willing to admit when we don't know something, right? But I guess when I see evil in the world, I tend to think that it's a time when people, we or maybe others, have lost sight of another person's humanity, and have really failed to treat them with inherent worth and dignity. I think that that's where it comes from, and I'm not going to say that, that's an easy thing to always remember. It's not. It's extremely challenging if you take it seriously, as we should. It can be really hard to see the humanity in people that maybe are denying your own or are doing things that make it unsafe for you to be in the world. I don't think that that's an easy question or an easy thing to move through, but I tend to think that evil happens in the world when we're not seeing each other as human, when we're not remembering that someone else has a place that they're coming from too. So our next question is, it says, times have been very difficult for the past several years in so many aspects of life. Is this just our perspective, or is it historically true? I don't know. And I think it's okay to say that you don't know. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your patience. So it says, times have been very difficult for the past several years in so many aspects of life. Is this just our perspective, or is it historically true? I'm not sure there's really a way to know. We haven't lived through all of time. I think everyone in their own time has thought that things were extremely difficult. But I will say, of course, that living through a pandemic, living through times of great economic strain, living through, times where there's really intense struggles for racial justice, and it feels like we're not being heard always in those fights. I think that people have always felt that things were incredibly difficult, and I think that this is something unique. I think that a pandemic like this, that's completely beyond understanding, beyond anything we could have imagined before. And I think that, as we continue to move into a time when people's day-to-day living expenses are getting so high, when people are struggling to make ends meet, it kind of feels like it's the pressure of all of these things. It's not any one thing, it's all of them together that are interconnected, just kind of squeezing. I think that's what makes it feel so difficult. So I would say that yes, this is something historically true in a certain way. So our next question is, who is your favorite religious guru? I'm not sure if I have a favorite religious guru, but I would say that I follow a lot of writers, both spiritual and not, and I've mentioned a lot of them so far that are really important to me. So I would say that Adrienne Marie Brown is both a writer writing about spirituality and also kind of just change day-to-day living, her own life. She's very important to me. I would also say that Nora McInerney, she is a writer who writes a lot about grief, toxic positivity culture. She's someone that's very important to me because of that acknowledgement of, we have to feel our feelings. We go through challenging life experiences, and that's okay. We have to acknowledge it in order to move through and to grieve. And I also think Kate Bowler, kind of along those same lines, she writes about the prosperity gospel. She's a professor. She also writes a lot about her experience of grief and kind of the idea, she's been told a lot, everything happens for a reason, and basically writes about how unhelpful that is. So those are some of my favorite religious gurus, some religious, some not. Okay, so the next question is, how do you feel about Jesus? Now, I'm going to kind of answer this for how I think a lot of you feel, and then I'll say a little bit about my own personal thoughts. So in Unitarian Universalism, everyone's going to have a different perspective, but I think most of us believe that Jesus was a man who had a lot of helpful ideas about the world, was a great teacher, but that he's not the Son of God. He's not divine. So I think that's kind of what you would expect to hear. And I think I also believe that. I would say that I personally am inspired by the message of Jesus from a justice-centered perspective, that there's a different way to be in the world. So, I think some people, specifically Howard Thurman, a theologian, have tried to draw a distinction between Christians and followers of Jesus. I'll let you do what you will with that. But I kind of tend to fall into that perspective of, I believe in a lot of what Jesus had to say about justice, about the way we should treat each other. And I find myself really disappointed often when, we find that people are not living into that. Obviously, maybe that's too high of an expectation to hold folks to, but I believe that Jesus had great things to tell us about how to be with one another. And I think that for Unitarian Universalism, I would say that that's helpful in terms of our covenant. You know, how do we want to treat each other? How do we want to be together? How do we want to live? So I feel inspired by his message of justice. Okay, we have another interesting question. What is the hardest part of being a UU minister? Yeah, I think I would say a lot of what may have drawn us into ministry, for me, being with people, pastoral care, writing and preaching, creating worship with a group of people together, that is a small part of what we actually spend our time on. And I think that can be difficult. You know, the administrative running of a church takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of work. So that, and I think just managing all of the feelings, all of the concerns, all of the things coming into you, and still being a person who enjoys the world and is, you know, and is happy and, you know, feeling good. I think that it takes a lot of work and discipline and practice. And so I think that's a lot of why people talk about spiritual practice and things like that. You need something to sustain you, because it can take over your spirit. The next question, I think very fittingly, is what spiritual practices do you use? So for me personally, and this is going to be different for each person, there's no one right way to engage in a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice is something that you do regularly that kind of fills up your spirit, that makes you feel connected to the world and to other people, that kind of replenishes your soul. So whether that's like saying a prayer each morning, whether that's reading a piece of poetry and journaling about it, whether that's taking a walk and trying to pay attention, whether it's a combination of all of these things, the definition of spiritual practice can be very broad, and it can be what you need it to be. So I would say that my spiritual practices do include prayer. They also include a regular walking practice of paying attention. So I once asked a colleague, what do you do for Lent? Have you ever done a 40-day practice? What are you thinking? And she said, you know, just walking for 40 days and noticing the way the leaves change, noticing the way the grass looks different in the morning light every day, that can be a practice. Paying attention is a practice. So I like to be in nature as much as I can. I like to try to slow down, not to listen to anything, but just to breathe. Notice what's around me. Notice the birds singing. Notice the people that I'm passing. Notice the people that I see every day on my walk, you know? So I think prayer, a walking, attentive practice, those are my two main. And obviously I write every week. Writing is very important to me. So our next question is, what is the meaning of life? You guys had some really great questions. You know, I mean, this sounds kind of silly, but I think that our life is about relationships with other people. So I think that the meaning of life is to love other people and to let ourselves be loved, you know, kind of in that quote from Mother Teresa. I always feel that that's central to why we're here. I think that life without our relationships with others, I'm not sure it would really have meaning. So that's what I think, and I'd love to know what you think. So our next question is, what from UU history informs us about how to approach our current chaotic worlds? And I'm sure there's a lot, but I kind of think of the broad strokes. So I would say that especially I think both Unitarians and Universalists, but I think there are certain movements throughout history, both the Unitarian controversy and kind of the emergence of Universalism, that show us that it's okay to have a different idea, and it's okay to unapologetically hold on to that idea. And it may be different than what society is telling us right now is the way we should be. But our people, our historical ancestors, have in a lot of ways always gone against the grain. And we continue to do that. That's one of the things that I'm most proud of about Unitarian Universalism. We've always kind of been there on the forefront of justice movements saying, no, we believe that all people are worthy. So I'm inspired by that. And I would say in the Unitarian controversy, the ability to say, like Lauren was pointing out earlier, that God can be a lot of different things. So on that side, just to say that there is a broadness, there is a theological openness. I think that that's really helpful. And I also would say that on the Universalist side especially, the idea that all are worthy, I think we keep coming back to that always. I think that's really the root of our faith. So when I think about UU history, I tend to think of those broad movements and not a specific event. And I think what that's telling us is that we need to stay the course. We need to stay the course on the path that we're on, to go against the grain, to be a voice for justice, to not be afraid to be outside of the norm, to be an unapologetic voice for change. That's the reason that I'm here, so, yeah. Okay, we have another funny question. We have a question about, will there be pizza in heaven? Well, I don't know if heaven exists, but I hope pizza will be there if it does. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, we have another question. What is outside of our universe? Outside of that, and outside of that? And I don't know, but I think that this question is important. The last time I did this, there was kind of another question along those lines. I think maybe from one of our children. And I think it's important to say you don't know. And one of the things that I thought was important to bring in last time was when you're, maybe not always when you're young, but I think when I was a child, I'll say, speak from my own experience, when I was a child, I used to get annoyed because my parents would tell me a lot of times, I don't know. Just like the girl in the story, Mariah Mitchell. Yes, I had a limit of questions I could ask each day. But I think as time goes, so when you're that age, you get frustrated by that, or I did at least, right? People saying they don't know. I think that what happens as time goes on in your life, it becomes more exciting that you don't know. There's something to look forward to, something you don't understand, something you don't have to plan out, something that is going to happen, So I think it changes as time goes on. It becomes more exciting, not knowing. So I just want to put that out there. Our next question says, can God exist outside of space and time? Well, I think that God can exist anywhere, personally, but I'm curious kind of about what space and time might mean to this person's concept of God. So I would say anywhere, but I'd love to know more after the service if that was you. All right, we'll do a few more and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Someone said, "What am I worshiping during worship service?" That's a good question. That's a good question. So I like the word worship because it connotes what we're going to come here and do. So I don't think that saying you're going to a worship service necessarily means that you're going to be worshiping or giving honor to a certain God or anything like that. I think that worship is for us, kind of like the way I feel about prayer. Worship is something that we do. So we come together, we gather in this community, we spend time sitting down, sitting in silence, saying a prayer if you want to, singing together. To me, I don't think that the word worship is only able to be used by people who believe in a God or who want to worship something. To me, worship is about gathering together. So I don't know if I would say we are worshiping each other. I don't think that. But I don't think that we're worshiping any one thing. I think we're doing a thing together. So that's what I think about worshiping. So someone else said, "I'm nervous that I'll put my foot in my mouth when I meet new neighbors. What's a good first question?" That is a good question. I think that when I meet new people, I tend to just, say, "Hello, how are you?" But I think, we're all looking for something a little deeper than that. And I think especially after so much time being virtual, I think that people are longing for a deeper connection, a way to really ask, like, what's important to you? How can I be a part of your life? Obviously, when you first met someone, that could be a lot. I think the fact that someone's even asking this question shows that they really care about their relationships with other people and how best to be. So I don't know. I mean, some people have said recently, like in check-in questions that I've been in, like for group gatherings, what's feeding your soul right now? What's important to you right now? To me personally, that is a lot. But I just think starting a conversation about something kind of random that doesn't, maybe not super high stakes, not super meaningful, and then entering from there, noticing how that person is and just kind of smiling, wanting to interact. I mean, we build relationships over time, I think. So it doesn't happen right away, and there's no perfect first question. But I think continuing to show up maybe is the more important thing. Okay, so we will answer one more question, and then we will finish up our worship service. So this last question I think is really important, and I'm not going to have the perfect answer because I do not have the text of what this asks about right in front of me. But the question says, what is the eighth principle, and why is it important to Unitarian Universalists? So I've talked about this a couple different times. And you're free to meet with me after the service if you'd like to talk more about it. There's a lot of people who also know about this in the congregation. But the eighth principle is a principle that we're proposing adding, and I will just say that, we have these things called the 7 principles about how we're going to be together, and I think they're very important. And I will also say we didn't start out with them. They're not set in stone. They've changed before, and they can change again. So I just want to put that out there. The eighth principle is a proposed addition that acknowledges the existence of racism and injustice in our world, and specifically asks us as congregations what we're going to do about it. And I think a lot of people are kind of freaked out by that because that means we have to actually do something, And it's a lot easier to sit and say, we should do this, or, well, we did do this in the past, or maybe we're gonna do this in the future. But the eighth principle actually asks us to be accountable to each other as a congregation, and to commit to what we're going to do. So it has a text, and it talks about injustice. You can look it up online if you Google 8th Principle UU. I'm sure you will find out about it. And a lot of folks would like to talk to you about it after the service, I'm sure. But the 8th Principle basically acknowledges injustice and asks us to do something. So I think that's why it's important. Unitarian Universalists have really always worked for justice, and I think for those of us who have been in this, longer than I have been alive, we know that racial justice is really at the center of so many other issues that we've been working on for a long time now, and not enough has been done, and it's time to do something. So I think we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for participating in this. And we will sing our closing hymn. It's number 354, I believe, We Laugh, We Cry. So I invite you to rise either in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, We Laugh, We Cry.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us, and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to a glimpse of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see even to question truly is an answer.
We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not our mission. to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. So friends, I'm in the back now if you my prayer for you as we go forth from our time together this morning, in the words of Rainer Maria Rilke, is that you learn to love the questions themselves so that one distant day you may live into an answer. Go in peace.